Hello everyone, this is Recap Revelations. Today we're entering the fascinating world of the film, Fatal Attraction. Warning, fresh spoilers ahead. Hold on tight, keep an eye out for the exciting adventure, and enjoy the ride. Dan Gallagher, a successful New York attorney, a loving family man happily married to his beautiful wife Beth along with their lovely daughter Ellen, live together in Manhattan, New York. On the evening of a book launch at a Japanese restaurant, he knows Alex Forrest, an editor at Robbins & Hart, and starts talking with her to know her better, when his wife calls him and interrupts their friendly session. Dan is very frustrated that he can't make love to his beloved wife, once because of the dog daily trip and a second time because of Ellen sleeping in his bed with Beth. Beth and Ellen go on a long weekend to see an interesting house they are thinking of moving to in the suburbs, and he accompanies them and says goodbye to them. Dan leaves work while the broken umbrella doesn't open in pouring rain. He re-meets Alex with a much bigger and stronger umbrella, and they escape the pouring rain to a nearby cafe to have dinner. At the cafe, Dan flirts with Alex, and they both agree that they will remain discreet. Alex surprises with a question about his wife's whereabouts, and he shares the real facts about her and where she gone for the weekend. "You're here with a strange girl being naughty boy," Alex tells him, and he justifies with a smile that it's just dinner. While Alex is already implying that they have been drawn to each other for the first time, and the choices are theirs alone as true adults. Dan and Alex are no longer holding back their own desires and embark on a fiery affair. They have live sex on the kitchen sink and then quickly move to the bed to continue what they started with much more passion. They relish their warm and sweet moment after their sex and go out to dance a sensual dance together on the dance floor and shake the city. Back at Alex's house, they make a passionate love in the elevator, and Alex gives Dan a maddening oral pleasure while they are almost discovered from above. Dan returns home, takes a shower, and talks to Beth, lies about yesterday's night's sins and covers them good, while she tells him that Ellen wants a rabbit. Alex on a surprise phone to Dan then regains his attention, promises to be a good girl, and they go on a fun walk in the park with the dog. Alex investigates Dan about his marriage and family while they are having a romantic meal listening to opera, and asks him what he is doing with her in a surprising turn. A slightly confused Dan explains to Alex that he is married and she should accept it as fact. After Alex and Dan make love again, Dan explains to her that he needs to go, and Alex has trouble accepting it logically and starts acting with violence to Dan with no reason. As Dan leaves her house in a dramatic and crazy move, Alex cuts off her veins, and Dan finds out in time, wears it, and saves her life, while comforting afterwards. Beth and Dan come together to see the house in the suburbs and be impressed by it, and after Dan falls in love with the attic and declares it a den, they decide to go for it and purchase the house. Alex surprises Dan in his workplace and apologizes for the embarrassing incident, thanks Dan for the dedicated treatment, and tries to invite him on another date, but he politely refuses, and they bid farewell. Alex continues to harass on the phone at work, and Dan tells her it's not a good idea for them to talk anymore and orders the secretary not to take calls from her anymore. While having a fun evening with friends, the phone unexpectedly rings. Beth replies while Dan looks worried, but Beth, who never stops saying hello, doesn't get an answer from the other side of the line. At 2 a.m, Alex brazenly calls, interrupts his rest, and demands to meet with Dan while he is all sleepy and unfocused. When they meet, Dan states to Alex she needs a mental treatment, and Alex reveals to Dan that she is pregnant with him but not ready to have an abortion at all and is interested in having the baby, and Dan feels that the world fell on him at that moment. Dan breaks into Alex's apartment, tries to find dirty evidence about Alex but fails the task, discovering her late husband died from a sudden heart attack years ago. When he returns home, Dan discovers that Alex is posing as a potential customer for the apartment they are selling, while Beth is full of naivete and continues to tell her details about the new house in the suburbs and the details of her new pregnancy. Alex teases him when she said maybe they know each other, while he is raging inside. Dan comes enraged to Alex's house and explains to her that it must stop, and she in return says she is not willing under any circumstances to ignore her. She will not be fucked and dumped as a street slut, and she wants respect as the mother of his child. As Dan leaves, she threatens to tell Beth the betrayal, but he in response chokes her and informs her that she will be killed if she does, and she says it only takes one phone call. Dan unexpectedly purchased a rabbit for Ellen, and upon leaving work back home, in the parking lot angrily discovers that she poured terrible acid on his vehicle, and the alarm goes wild as a result. Alex proceeds to chase Dan, and she leaves him a tape in the car in which she does not stop carving and cursing him, explaining how selfish he is in the situation he created with his own hands. Alex follows him to his house, peeking through the window, while Dan surprises Ellen with a new rabbit he brought to her and approaches to vomit quickly in the bushes. Dan arrives at the police to complain about Alex through his supposed client, but they announce that without proof nothing can be done and he needs hard evidence. Beth returns home to see a huge pot brewing on the gas beyond her will, and discovers with horror Ellen's rabbit dead inside it, and begins screaming with a horror, along with Ellen realizing that her rabbit is gone, yelling also. Dan knows that he won't call the police, has no choice, confessing to Beth the affair with Alex and explaining to her that Alex is behind the shocking act, and Alex is pregnant as a result, but she is furious, driving him out of the house while Ellen watches the scene. Dan packs a suitcase and leaves for a timeout from the family, leaving Beth and Ellen. He then informs Alex that Beth already knows about the affair and that the matter is over, and Beth threatens her to kill her if she ever gets close to her family again. Beth arrives to pick up Ellen from the garden, but discovers that she is no longer there, and someone has already picked her up. Beth searches for Ellen in a terrible panic while Alex is having fun with Ellen in a theme park, buying her ice cream, and takes her to a dangerous roller coaster, while Ellen screams, Beth under terrible emotional stress and having a fatal car accident. Dan arrives running to visit Beth in the hospital and assures her that it will be okay and she should not worry. Dan surprises Alex with a terrible rage at her apartment by punching her several times and almost choking her completely and leaving no drop of air in her, but gives up at the last minute, realizing that this is not the way. Alex, on the other side, after being slightly sedated, attacks him with a huge kitchen knife, but he neutralizes her and takes her out of her hands, quietly lays on the countertop, and leaves Alex's house in silence. The station police are unable to track Alex down for questioning, and Beth, who has returned from the hospital, is lovingly given towels by Dan and asks Dan to make a steaming cup of tea for her. Dan put water in the kettle and put it on the fire to boil while he locks the house bolts. Beth suddenly discovers Alex with a butcher knife looking at her at the front door of the bathtub. Psychotic Alex begins cutting into Beth's live flesh and explains to her how guilty she is of losing Dan and kept him away from her, who decided to live in the suburbs on purpose. The bath is filled to the fullest and water begins to pour out of the bath and begins to liquefy to the ceiling below while the dog licks them. Alex calls Beth a selfish bitch, and Alex begins to try to stab her madly. A terrible catfight ensues between Alex and Beth on the bathroom floor while Alex tries to stab her at any possible cost. The kettle stops whistling and Dan, finally hearing the terrible screams, runs up the stairs to help Beth. Dan shoves Alex wildly and Alex cuts him hard twice with the knife, and then the rest of the forces drowns her terribly long in the bathtub in order to eliminate her completely and to murder her definitively. A stunned Dan doesn't notice that Alex is still a little breathing, and she surprises with another knife attack, but this time she is shot by Beth and collapses lifeless into the blood-filled bathtub. In the final scene, the police arrive to close the matter, and Beth and Dan embrace very warmly, with the family photo zooming on the front door. Fatal Attraction is a gripping psychological thriller that keeps viewers on the edge of their seats. Michael Douglas and Glenn Close deliver outstanding performances, their on-screen chemistry adding depth to the intense storyline. Director Adrian Lyne's brilliant direction, coupled with striking cinematography, creates a suspenseful atmosphere throughout the movie. The film explores the consequences of infidelity, delving into the thin line between desire and obsession. With iconic scenes and a haunting score, Fatal Attraction is a timeless classic that lingers in the mind. A must-watch for fans of intense psychological dramas. At the Oscars, Fatal Attraction is a total winner with nominations for Best Actor for Michael Douglas, Best Actress for Glenn Close, and Best Director for Adrian Lyne. The cinematography and script are also in the spotlight. With killer performances and style, Fatal Attraction is owning the Oscars scene. If you enjoyed this recap from Recap Revelations, be sure to subscribe for a continuous stream of similar videos. Your support means the world to us, so don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks a million for tuning in.